One of my spark birds was like when I first started chasing stuff with a great kiskadee that was in Rondo. Where my inspiration came from was, Kaya, Ezra, William, and Andy just doing these Ontario big years and just seeing like what they could do at such a young age. It inspired me to do this. Going out birding, looking at all the warblers and stuff, not knowing what you could see that day. For example, like a sedge wren we just found while birding the sort of fields in Oakville. It's actually the only sedge wren in all of HSA in 2023. So for example, like Nelson sparrow in fall, you have a short window for those. I was chasing a LaFont sparrow, and as I was walking through the same field that another person had watched the LaFont sparrow from, a Nelson sparrow popped out of the grass, going after a species, not seeing it, but getting another species that you weren't really expecting.
Well, here I am again with $1,000 for one of our couples, and if anyone says the secret word today, a Legzdin albatross will drop down and pay them each $100. Oops, sorry, that was the introduction to You Bet Your Life. So, welcome birders and non-birders who have to put up with the birders in their lives to the Big Year Podcast with me, the one, the only, thankfully, Robert Baumander. Today is August 1st, 2024, the official start of the dog days of summer. Actually, for birders in Ontario at least, the birding really begins to slow down around the beginning of July. But even then, there are still a few rare birds to chase, including a brown booby and a ruff. Boobies are quite rare in Ontario, but I've seen a few over the years. Of course, if you really want to see boobies in their natural habitat, you need to visit South Florida in the spring. And what's a ruff? I'm not exactly sure where its name comes from. It could be the rough feathers that puff up when it's in breeding plumage. It's a medium-sized sandpiper, and in its breeding grounds, the males put on spectacular displays worthy of any fashion show catwalk. Alas, though I've seen plenty of boobies, I have never seen a ruff display. For that, you need to visit a lek in Northwestern Alaska. Now, to get to today's episode, we are returning once again to Ontario, and we'll meet a young man who in 2023, after watching so many of his fellow birders do big years, decided that he would like to enjoy trying one himself. Marcus Legzdins was in his final year of high school, had his driver's license but couldn't drive alone, and was birding in the Oakville area when in December of 2022 decided to do his HSA big year. What's the HSA, you ask? I had heard of it, but just thought it was kind of where birders who lived in the Hamilton area reported their sightings. Exciting sightings. But it has exact boundaries and strict rules for reporting species for the official records. It's a circle 25 miles, about 40 kilometers, centered on downtown Hamilton. Yes, we birders are sticklers for details. You see the bird on the wrong side of the road? Well, you haven't really seen it in the HSA until it crosses into the HSA. I wonder if it's bad form to coax the bird over the boundary line with calls or sunflower seeds. Anyway, Marcus was perfectly located in Oakville to begin his year-long quest. So let's get to it. Oh, and did I ever tell you about the time I hit a moose?
Yes, a long time ago. Twice already.
Twice in the past 2 episodes. Oh, well, forgive me. I hit a moose, and my memory is kind of fuzzy at the best of times. So where was I? Oh, right. Marcus and his 2023 Hamilton Study Area Big Year. We might have met a few years ago at Colonel Sam Smith Park looking for a white-eyed vireo.
It is.
Because that was in the pre-COVID days. The white-eyed vireo was actually quite a popular bird at Colonel Sam that year. And was that one of the first birds that you chased and really got excited about?
Yeah, I guess that was probably, it was such a beautiful bird. And yeah, it was just a lot of people were there. And yeah, that was one I really enjoyed. But I think one of my spark birds was like when I first started chasing stuff with a great kiskadee that was in Rondo.
Oh, yes, I do remember that one. Did you go see it early on when it was there in late in the year, or did you go early the next year?
I think we went to go see it like late in the year.
I wasn't expecting it to still be there in January, so I was pretty excited to go see it. There were a lot of people there when I went because, it's a new year. Even though they might have seen it 2 weeks earlier, they all ran to see it to add it to their winter lists and their year lists. That is one of the strange, interesting things about birders is that there are so many lists that we make that it doesn't matter if it's a new month or a new week or a new year or a new season. A lot of birders are going to go, I have to start a new list for that. And how did you start listing?
From a young age, I just found it entertaining keeping lists of things. But the bird kind of listing started. I was just at my grandma's house in Indiana, and I was just keeping track of birds that I saw at the feeder. And from there, I just found it just entertaining keeping lists of all the birds I saw, and then brought that back home, and just going out and seeing what I could see in my own backyard here.
A lot of people who are listers and chasers, I think that is probably something they had done in one way or another, even before they discovered birding, just like you. I was always a list keeper. I always liked looking at the top 10 lists of all the different things that you could find in the Guinness Book of World Records and things like that. If I had thought about it, would be an indication that I should have started birding at a much younger age than what I did. And last year, you decided to do a local big year. And which area did you decide to do your big year in?
It was the Hamilton study area.
And what does the Hamilton study area encompass? I know some of the places. I think probably some people don't know where the exact borders are.
25-mile radius from Thundern Castle, so that's basically right in Hamilton, and that kind of is equivalent to 40 kilometers. And so basically all the kind of landmarks you can go off of is Brantford, and the furthest north it goes is just south of Guelph.
Okay, so that's why a lot of the Hamilton birders show up in Brantford when there are some of the more interesting birds. In Brantford, we seem to get all the rare gulls.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And some of those places are just basically right on the border of the HSA.
Are there very strict rules as to where that exact 25-mile or 40-kilometer circle is, where you have to have a bird cross the road to count it? Or is it a little bit more flexible in terms of exactly what's countable and what's not?
Yeah, so when I was doing my big year, the bird itself, I think it goes for almost all big year rules, is the bird itself has to be inside your counting area. Even if you're standing in the area and the bird is outside, it wouldn't count. And that did happen to me for one species last year. And so, yeah, just an example of how the bird has to be inside.
I have my own frustrating example from 2022, which was spending late morning, early afternoon at the Niagara River, wanting a limpkin to just fly far enough over the Niagara River that I could estimate that it was in Canada for even a second, and it didn't do it. And then the next day there was a severe snowstorm, and there was no way that bird was going to survive. And last year and even this year, limpkins are everywhere. Did you have a limpkin in the HSA last year or not?
No, we did. We had something similar, a roseate spoonbill that was just flying out of the HSA, but I did have a similar experience to you as waiting for a bird to fly into the HSA, but it never did. Those are Bohemian waxwings in the University of Guelph Arboretum.
What part of the Arboretum is in the HSA and which part is not? Do they use roads as boundaries or do they use park boundaries? How does that work?
Yeah, I go off just a layer you can put on Google Maps, but it just creates a circle.
Okay.
That area, you can just search it up online. So I just went off that, and it basically splits the Arboretum in half. So the north side is out of HSA and the south side is in. And these waxwings were the Bohemian waxwings. They were in the north part, so I was waiting for them to fly just a bit south. They were 150 meters out of the HSA boundary, so wow. I did get to see them, and when they were outside, and I basically just walked over to the boundary line, hoping that they would fly across, but they never did, and apparently they flew the opposite direction, so that never worked out. But later in the year, I was able to catch up with a flock of waxwings, and that was really awesome.
And where in the HSA do you live that makes it a desirable place for you to have chosen for a big year?
Yeah, so I live in Oakville, so it's not far from the center of the HSA.
Okay.
In close proximity to almost everything.
Mm-hmm. What was your inspiration to do a big year? Everybody has their own story of big year inspiration. Some of it is reading a book about someone who did a big year. For a lot of us in 2012 and on, it was seeing the movie The Big Year. And of course, you had a lot of local Ontario birders in 2022, along with myself, doing big years. And how did that all fit into your desire to participate in such an endeavor?
Yeah, so like you said, basically for a lot of people, the movie, and that's probably one of my favorite.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot of times too, and I go back to it often.
Yeah, I've watched it so many times that I just find it now that I've completed a big year. And yeah, where some of my inspiration came from, but majority of where my inspiration came from was Kaya, Ezra, William, and Andy, and yourself, and just doing these Ontario big years and Canada-wide big year, and just seeing like what they could do at such a young age. It inspired me to do this.
And how old are you now?
I am 17.
17. So you already have your driver's license, or were you depending on the kindness of other birders and parents?
Probably I was depending on my parents and the other kind that were able to help me, because I just got my learner's permit, so I can drive but can't drive alone. So I always have to have someone there with, at least for now.
How did your parents react to your decision to do it? Did they take it seriously as though they knew that was something you've committed the entire year to? Or did they say, okay, we'll take you some places, but didn't really think it would be something that snowballed throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, pretty much like that, as you described. It was impulse decision. It was sometime in December. It was the last few days of December, and I was just like, why not just give myself a challenge and do this gear? And I told my parents, and I guess they didn't think much about it. Like you said, just take you places here and there. And obviously it was difficult because school, like it's hard to imagine doing a big year while still in high school.
Right.
And you still have to pass your classes, but going out burning as much as possible. It's hard to balance, but the support of them, I received so much support, and just not just my determination to go out, but for them to keep going out and my friends to keep taking me out was just so helpful. I couldn't have done without them.
Yes, and the ability for parents to have the opportunity to do it is as much as important as their desire to do it. And did they sometimes have to shuffle things around to get you to a rare bird, for example, a roseate spoonbill or something similar?
Yeah, I suppose so. It took a lot of time out of their schedule, and they definitely did sacrifice a lot to take me out of places like the boundaries of HSA, where we would go bright and early in the morning, and we were out all day till dusk, and even beyond that. It just certainly takes a lot of energy.
And what we haven't talked about is how many species you did see, and if there was a record you were chasing, because I hadn't really heard of a big year prior to last year. So what were the circumstances surrounding that?
Yes, I saw 275 from HSA, and the all-time record that I was shooting for was 280 species. That was set by Rob Dobos in 20.
One of the first COVID big years. So many people were getting into birding, and a lot of people had a lot of free time on their hands. And without work and school, he probably had a little bit more time to devote to it than you did in high school.
Yeah, certainly. That was the biggest challenges. First of all, I set my goal. So when I first had my idea to do a big year, I set my goal before I started, and I set it at 275, not knowing the record of 280. And I went off a list found on the Hamilton Naturalist Club website, and off that list, I found the highest total that a young birder has seen, like under the age of 18, in the HSA was 4 species.
Okay.
I later learned that turned out to be for all of Ontario.
Ah, okay. It was an HSA birder, but birding everywhere.
Yeah, and then I did some more research, and then came to the conclusion that the actual all-time record for under the age of 18, was 55 species. So,
okay, so you blew by that one.
Yeah, so in the end, I surpassed it by 20 species. So that was a highlight for me, setting that record for a young birder. And I came close to the all-time record set by a retired birder.
Yes.
That's definitely
And what is the furthest that you would have to go from Oakville in the HSA area? Where do you end up? Is it like the outskirts of Brantford or up in Guelph?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's definitely around Brantford, and in some places in South, I would think so.
For me, it used to be coming out to Brantford when I lived in Toronto was an excursion. And now you're not going into downtown Toronto. I came into Brantford for my first rare bird, which was the slatyback gull the first time it showed up. I had never even expected that was a bird I would ever see in Ontario, let alone in North America, other than Alaska. So that was my first trip to Brantford, and never would have expected I would live out here in the land of the rare gulls. And we've had glaucous winged and California gulls out here, and they were seen less than 10 minutes from my house where I live now, and I missed both of those birds. And also a short-billed gull. Did you have any of those gulls in Brantford area along the Grand River?
I know there was. I did chase a few of them. I know there was ladyback gull sometime later on in the year, but didn't go chasing that one. There was that Franklin's gull that we actually met up at. We looked for that. And yeah, we never did see that Franklin's gull, but it was definitely one that did chase. And there was that glaucous wing gull in a field in Brantford that I went looking for. I couldn't find. It definitely is tough chasing gulls, but you never know.
I did get a Franklin's gull for Brant County a number of weeks ago, and it was in a field where we get a lot of the gulls on Cockshutt Road, and that was on the Brantford Christmas bird count day too. That's one of the things we talked about late in the year for you was people doing Christmas bird counts in December. How many of those counts were beneficial to you?
Yes, I did 3 bird counts, Christmas bird counts. That was the home teal bird count, the Hamilton bird count, the Flamborough bird count, and the Peachtree bird count. And so on the Hamilton, on the South Teal bird count, I was told about a group of white-winged crossbills in the Blackheath Creek Provincial Park campground side. And so that was one I still needed for the year. And I was given directions from the finder about where they were, and they were found on the count while I was doing my count, my area. So they were in a totally separate area. And so when I was told about these, I took a break from my area and went over to Blackheath Provincial Park. And I was actually lucky enough to end up finding them. It took me a little while, and I wasn't necessarily sure I was in the right area because I didn't have any sort of pin or actual
Specific location.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a much more satisfying way to find a bird than using my GPS to get to a specific spot.
Yeah, that's right. And it's because the crossbills, they like the pine cones in pine trees, and there was lots of those around, and I just kept walking around, and I just noticed the flock flying into the very tips of the pine trees, and there they were, and it was just also relieved to get those, and because I wouldn't have a chance later on in the year. I think I got those in November, so I was really happy to get those.
We had white-winged crossbills in Grant County, but I went to this dead-end road in what some people might call hillbilly country, where you can hear the shotguns go off, and I tried in that same spot 3 or 4 times and did not get them.
Yeah, I think I actually went to the exact same place you're talking about for the white-winged crossbills at the dead-end road.
Mm-hmm, yes.
That's I think it's like a deer hunting place or something like that. And I went there before school with my dad, and we tried for a few hours, and we didn't get white-winged crossbill. And you never know what you're going to see. Like, you could drive all the way to Brantford looking for a bird and not get it, and it's just so much luck involved in a big year.
And that is very true, but you also have a certain amount of determination and willpower to keep going day after day that improves your luck from time to time.
Yeah.
What was the toughest bird that you had to get that took multiple trips to get?
Yeah, I have a few examples of those, but probably most difficult and most, I have a few of those. And probably one of them is East. So they breed in Ontario, but more north of us, or just I'm pretty sure they breed north of us, and they are an annual migrant through the HSA. So they do pass through, and they pass through in a short window. So you have this short window from to May, end of April to mid-May, and I had some luck in 2022, and I actually found 2 of them roosting in a whole bunch of this wet kind of scrubby habitat. And this year I went back to that park at least 5 times, I think, looking for them, spending hours in the same park, and coming up empty every single time. And we came mid-May and still hadn't found a whippoorwill. So it was definitely disappointing. I tried to repeat my luck, but that's what it is. we just got lucky, and it was actually at the end of May where we drove around just roads in northern around the regional forest, and we got lucky actually, and actually heard a whipsawell. That was just really surprising. It took so much work to just keep going around the roads there, and it's like a miracle actually that we heard it, because they only call for a certain amount of time. They might go just a few times at dusk, and then they're silent. So to be that's basically just being at the right spot at the right time.
That's the case with the Chuckwill's widow. I have a spot whenever I'm in Florida in late winter, early spring, that you can just sit there at dusk and hear them, and you get less than 10 minutes of them calling. And until the one in Prince Edward County, that's the only place I'd ever had Chuckwill's widow. And in 2022, I was, along with the 5 of them that are doing the Ontario Big Year, expecting Prince Edward County one to be there. I guess birds sometimes just have to come to the end of their lives, and that one came to the end of its life. That was, for a lot of us, a bit of a disappointment. Was there a bird or two in 2023 that we all got in 2022 that you weren't able to get last year?
Yeah, probably the most kind of expected species that didn't show up was American white pelican. We usually have at least one pelican that comes into Coots Paradise sometime in the summer, and it usually stays for at least a few days. For 2023, not to get one, it was honestly quite disappointing, but there were like other species that kind of made up for that. In Peel at the Port Cook Harbor, there's a western grebe that makes annual appearances there, or at least it's possibly the same one. But this year it didn't leave, and it was found in 2023, so I was happy about that one.
Was the roseate spoonbill in the HSA?
Oh yeah, that one was, I believe it was found by, I think it was just a walker or something like that, just walking along the Grand River, and it was seen on one of the islands, and then the next morning it was picked up by Bill and Sarah and Eric Lamond. Mm-hmm. And I believe they were outside of the HSA when they saw it, but it was flying, to my knowledge, it was flying from inside the HSA out of the HSA.
Okay.
I don't think definitely wasn't chaseable, but, and then a few days later, there was a roseate spoonbill found in Elgin County.
All of us Brantford birders raced down to the Grand River the next day. In fact, I was there near the end of the day also looking and just hoping that maybe it just landed right next to the Grand River and just was hanging out there.
Yeah, I was also looking that evening with my mom, and we were looking at the same spot. It was found like on the side of an island, and there was great egrets there, and we waited till dusk, and but we never showed up. And that was basically right on the border, so there wasn't much to go anywhere else.
The other bird I'm not sure showed up last year, which was a really great one for all of us in 2022, were cave swallows. Did they show up this year or not?
They didn't show up at 50 Point last year, and I was following. First of all, you need a certain type of weather kind of pattern to push them up from the Gulf Coast, and we didn't really get any sort of major system that would have boosted them up to Ontario. So we didn't get any, but last year's totals, I was definitely following up with reports along the East Coast and places like New Jersey and some other states. They were seeing like maybe 1s and 2s of cave swallows. Well, in 2022, when I and all you guys got like the several over 50 Point, they had like in the 30s. There definitely wasn't any sort of push to bring them up to Ontario last year.
The other one that was disappointing in 2022 was the swallowtail kite. And 2022, we didn't get one, but we were able to count them last year. But were they in the HSA?
No, I don't think we had one last year.
And were there birds that you made lists of that you said, okay, I know I'm going to get these birds. I'm only going to look for them during a certain season. I'm not going to, if a yellow rump warbler shows up in January, I'm not going to go out of my way to chase that. So you had a list of birds that you were going to get at very specific times in specific places. What were the sort of the outlier birds that you pinned your hopes on for the record that you had to really keep an eye out for and make specific trips to get?
Yeah, this is my first time doing a big year, so obviously I should have definitely planned a lot more, as I didn't really put in any sort of effort into planning weeks or days ahead of the big year as others have.
Don't worry about that, because I've done 3 or 4 big years and I didn't plan any of them. So sometimes I wish I did. I would have seen at least 5 more birds in 2022. The planning can be helpful, but I think it's also first time you do it. Maybe it's just more fun to just see what it's like and get a kind of a taste and a feel for it.
Yeah, exactly. As you said earlier on, some of the species that I was targeting was, for example, like Nelson sparrow and in fall, you have a short window for those, and they're obviously very skulky sparrows, so you have to spend a lot of time in the field searching tall grasses and in just difficult environments to find those.
Boots Paradise used to be a great place for them, and I haven't had to go there for one in years. Where did you get yours?
I got mine at Peel, it was unexpected actually. I was chasing a sort of a LeConte sparrow, so it's similar to a Nelson sparrow, but it's just a little bit different. Obviously, LeConte sparrow is a bit rarer than Nelson sparrow, so I went to go look for LeConte sparrow on Peel, and as I was walking through the same field that another person had apparently watched the LeConte sparrow from, a Nelson sparrow popped out of the grass and offered a nice view in the sunlight and grass down there. So I was able to get a photo, and it definitely was Nelson sparrow. And yeah, that was just an unexpected one, going after a species, not seeing it, but getting another species that you weren't really expecting.
That's one of the exciting times that you can almost cheer for yourself, because you can say, hey, I found this one all by myself. I wasn't just going where someone said there was a bird. Were there a number of birds like that you could call self-found?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of that occurred definitely in May, when you were just obviously out a lot by yourself and going out birding, looking at all the warblers and stuff, not knowing what you could see that day. So yeah, that definitely in May, that happened a lot. With, for example, a sedge wren we just found while birding some sort of fields in Oakville. That was definitely unexpected, and that was actually the only sedge wren in all of HSA in 2023. So if I hadn't found that sedge wren, I wouldn't have gotten it, and they actually turned out to be a breeding pair. So
oh, cool.
We followed all of them through May and June, July, August, and yeah, finally in August is when I found two recently fledged young of sedge wren. So that was just super impressive, and that was just definitely a highlight of the year.
I got my sedge wren, of all places, Colonel Sam, but seeing them in unexpected places, seeing birds that you need for the year and you get it in an unexpected place, that means you don't even have to think about it for the rest of the year, is really cool. It makes the stress level go down for sure.
And another example of just not knowing what you're going to see, that happened a lot at Van Wagner's Beach in the fall. So that's a place where you just as much time as possible, and you just go there mainly on east winds when a lot of things get blown in close to the shore. But we found that with even the slightest wind, not even being east wind, we saw so many Jaegers, and we actually got some of the closest views of Jaegers on the lightest wind. You never know what you're going to see there.
Yeah, we had one that I think you were there that day too, where it literally flew over the asphalt path that people walk along and right toward us at the viewing platform. And that was one of the coolest things, because it's not where you're going to expect to see it, and it just flew right over the path, and everybody got to see it up close. That was a Sabine's gull, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, an adult bunch. Yeah, awesome.
Did your previous year's experience help you in terms of spotting birds on your own, or at least knowing where to look and what to look for last year?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just like a kind of lead up to this, just knowing what to look for, giving all the birders well, and knowing what days to be out. And that was probably most of it.
I just want to get back to migration. Where in what was your local patch for warblers in the spring? Where does one go for the best warblers if you're not going to Point Pelee and Colonel Sam or Rondeau and you're in the HSA? Where would you recommend people spend a lot of their time?
Yeah, so it's obviously a bit different when you're doing a more localized figure, but you don't have all these big popular spots to go to, like Point Pelee or places like that. So you have to find your own kind of personal hotspots and places that you personally find the most variety of things. So obviously closer to the lake is probably a better option, or closer just migrant traps, which is parked off the lake. So we found a pretty good spot called Shell Park, and it's in Bronte, and it's in it's a medium-sized park, so you can bird it for a few hours, see what you can find there. It's very accessible, like paved trails there, and yeah, it's a great spot.
That all sounds really exciting and fun. And before I ask you for some advice for some other young birders, what was the bird that you really wanted, you really chased that you didn't get? Even some of the warblers that maybe you would have expected to get that you didn't?
Yeah, warblers were the most in the family that I didn't get that I chased. So it's a difficult year for warblers. So in May we chased 2 reports of gray warblers. One just wasn't there when we got there, and one was seen by quite a few people and stayed for a few hours. But the only reason we missed that because it was school. And then when I did have time to go chase it, there was a big storm and it was so windy and we couldn't fly after that. And there was things like Connecticut warbler, which showed up, but we couldn't never track down. And they're just such a stealthy warbler that just are so hard to chase. And there was only one report of cerulean warbler throughout the year that we chased but couldn't find. And there was no prairie warblers as well, which is unexpected.
It's remarkable how many species you can miss and still see 275 in a single calendar year during the course of your HSA big year, which you deserve. Congratulations. And just for people who might think that this is something they'd want to do and might not think that they're old enough or experienced enough, what would you tell some of the younger birders that might think, hey, I could do this too? And what advice would you give them, and what would you tell them to plan for ahead of time?
Yeah, I just say, just go as much as possible. It doesn't have to be any sort of far distance. Like, you don't need to go far to find birds, and you just get to know local species well, and then you expand from that to going to rare things. And when you're doing a big year, it's just like you gotta do as much possible to get as many species as possible. And yeah, I guess just have fun
and don't sweat the missed birds too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you gotta just move on. Don't let the species, just because you missed something doesn't mean you're not gonna reach your goal. You just never know what could happen. You could find some sort of rare bird, and at the end of the year that gets you to your goal, or just so many things show up at the end of the year, like what happened to me, like that. So there were so many good species at the end of the year that was just incredible. I never would have thought to get them.
What was the last bird you saw, and how late in the year was it?
So that was Franklin's Gull in Waterloo. That was on December 28th. So pretty close there.
Sometimes those are the most satisfying birds. It's the last one you get that you've worked an entire year for. Did the year seem to fly by, or did the end of December seem like it was never going to get there?
Yeah, it honestly moved by pretty quickly. And yeah, like looking back on it, like knowing like that, or just at least like when it was May already, it was here so quickly, and then the summer goes by, and then it's fall migration, and then you're almost at the end of the year, and then obviously November and December are slower months. But in the HSA this year, there were a lot of birds that made it worth it.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time. It was quite enjoyable to run into you during the course of the year. And my embarrassing story is that in 2022, I had so much trouble remembering which one was Kaya, which one was Ezra, and I would run into you and I wouldn't be sure if it was you or if it was Kaya or it was Ezra, and I was like, I just can't call anybody by name, and because I know I'm going to embarrass myself. There was at least one occasion where I realized afterwards that it was you and not one of the other two, and I was like, oops, I'm glad I didn't call you Ezra or Kaya, because that would have been embarrassing. But it does happen to all of us. We, especially at Van Wagner's Beach in November, when we're all covered up and only our noses and eyes are sticking out, so sometimes you can't recognize anybody. I guess it's the people you bird with the most that you probably recognize, no matter what they're wearing, just by the camera hanging off their shoulders or where their binoculars. How into the photography were you, and was that important for you to get pictures, or were you more focusing on seeing the bird, getting a good look at it, and being able to record it before thinking about photographs?
Yeah, that was definitely a goal I set for myself, was try to photograph or document as many species as possible, just try to get proof and evidence, obviously just also for the memories, like look back at things. And they're just, definitely it obviously helps to get some photos. For example, like difficult IDs, like not knowing what you're looking at. But I think I got over 200 species photographed. So close, over 200 species photographed. So I was pretty happy about that.
Excellent. I wonder what your career path looks like. Is it in ornithology, or is it in nature studies or conservation?
Probably going to be a mix of those. I'm in college this fall, so I'm doing a fish and wildlife program.
Okay, you have a lot to talk about with Andy then.
Yeah. I've contacted him, and he told me about how great of a program it is. I'm really looking forward to that, and hopefully I can someday reach my goal of being an ornithologist or doing studies with birds. That's probably one of my dreams.
You are off to a great start, and I wish you all the success, and I'm sure I will see you sometime, somewhere when I least expect it, chasing a rare bird somewhere in southern Ontario. Marcus, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, hello. I'm back. I didn't realize the podcast was already over. Well, thanks to Marcus and for all you nice folks out there in podcast land for joining me on another birding adventure. You don't have to be crazy to do a big year, as Marcus has demonstrated today, but it doesn't hurt either. But a common theme I have found is that even if it's not to the level of obsessiveness like me and others, it's a desire to make sense of the world, whether it's making lists or traveling to exotic places to see things you've never seen before, and in some cases, never imagined seeing. It's the desire to collect, not things, but memories and stories you can share. So I'm not sure I have ever met a big ear birder who also wasn't a photo buff. But the exotic locales and photo memories are not necessary to enjoy many aspects of the big ear or birding in general. Marcus birded in a pretty good patch, but as he told me, anywhere you live, you can find that one spot where you'll almost always have good birding. Big ears can be really small or really big. And right there in the middle is the state big ear. Which brings me to next month's episode with Daniel Bernard. In 2022, he set out to break the all-time record for big ears in the state of Michigan. Join us next month to learn more. So, see you in September. Well, that's the song, but to be more accurate, hear me in September. And as always, may the birds be with you.